All right, why don't we get started? Let me hit the elephant in the room first. If you're going to make a 3 marks wearing blue shirts and blue blazers jokes, it needs to be good. Like the basic puns have already been used up, so if you've got a pun, bring it forward, but it's got to be quality. Great. It's great to see everybody. My name is Mark Foreman. I am a director in the energy transition practice here at CLEAResult. I've been in the clean tech space for a couple of decades, really focused on delivering and operationalizing clean tech programs. I have called demand response events on a dial-up modem. If you're ever in a Raley's grocery store in Northern California in the summer of 2005 and we blacked you out 5 minutes every night, sorry about that. I'm really excited about today's discussion with Mark and Mark. By the way, just address us Mark F, Mark D, Mark H. Because we've had a lot of conversation over the last couple days about different program ideas, different things we could do. Really what the three of us focus on is actually making it happen. And so what we want to spend today on is talking about, the devil is in the details. We want to talk a bit about those details. So I want to give Mark H and Mark D a chance to introduce themselves first, and then we do have a little bit of a posted exercise we're going to start today's meeting with.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Hodak with AES Utilities, so that's AES Indiana and AES Ohio. I'm our manager of customer programs. We try to have a program that kind of looks at all aspects of energy delivery and meets a need. So we've got energy efficiency programs, demand response programs, electrification programs focusing on EVs, green power programs, and multiple, I would say, community assistance programs that we work alongside others at our company to deliver. I've been in the space for, it's hard to say this, but 20 years, and have been with AES for 7. Prior to that, I had a stint with CLEAResult, and prior to that, I had a stint with a company that was acquired by CLEAResult. So know many of the folks in the room. It's nice to see friendly faces, and looking forward to talking more about how we get things done as things get more challenging and harder to get accomplished.
Hi, my name is Mark Delavan. I'm with Entergy Texas, and that's a utility that's just north of Houston. I've been at Entergy for 8 years, and my claim to fame is that my first day at Entergy is when Harvey hit Houston. So I got thrown into storm duty right on my first day, and at my second day, they put me in charge of food for the entire storm. So that's my first 2 weeks at Entergy, was just trying to help bring order back to Houston. I am a former CLEAResult employee. I was in the Houston office helping out on the Entergy program. My CLEAResult number is 2173. And and I really love energy efficiency. I'm a mechanical engineer from my education, but this is an industry that I really love. I live out in the country with my wife and 2 daughters. We have more horses than I can count, a bunch of chickens and goats, and a lovely garden. So I'm kind of a mixed bag.
So we're going to start with a bit of audience participation. I promise we're not calling on people. You get a chance to do this yourself. And we're going to do a little bit of a posted exercise. Also going to do it old-fashioned, recognize it's the second day of the conference, give folks a chance to move around a bit. So we've all implemented programs. We've all had some responsibility for getting a program up and running. It could be direct. You could have been the person in the field. You could have been the person coordinating. You could have been the program manager. I see a few folks here who can say all of the above. We've all had challenges. There's a reason we, get the gray hair or pull it out. We get the wrinkles. Again, we've all been there, done that. What I'd like to do is a little bit of a survey. Though you should all have Post-it notes up on your tables. That's part of the reason I moved everybody to the front 2 rows. I want you to write down some of the challenges you've had. It could be, this is really free form. Think about these categories. Think about, was it a regulatory challenge? Was it getting internal buy-in? Was it cost effectiveness? Was it actually operationalizing it? Was it some external third party? Was it something else? We're going to take about 5 minutes. Feel free to discuss amongst your tables. Happy to have everyone chat about this. But once you've got your Post-its filled out, we're going to take 5 minutes. There's easels on the side there with the categories on there. If you've got an other, use external. Go put your Post-its up there, and then we'll do a quick roundtable before we jump into that. Again, any challenge you've had implementing a program, I'd imagine you should be able to use up your Post-its pretty quickly on this. So again, we're going to take about 5 minutes. Feel free to chat amongst your tables if you wish. We'll come back to you in a couple minutes.
Can we play the Jeopardy music?
We're going to sing it.
Do 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 do.
If you need more Post-its, let me know. We can come around and pass them amongst the table. All right.
Okay. Sorry,
I see some folks still writing. Take your time. Looks like you folks are all set over on this end. I see. What's that? Okay, great. You folks want a minute or so, or are you all set? You good? Okay. All right.
A lot of internal buy-in stickies.
Whoa.
It's supposed to be anonymous. Please look away.
All right. See, we'll wait on the one more here, and then we'll go ahead and read them together. Mark D., you ended up with a heavy load here.
I did.
All right.
All right, so starting off with regulatory, that's always been a very hard sector to try to get any approval. So you got to get intervener buy-in. So those are the people opposed to you. And that's always a big challenge, is trying to get them on the same page, because it's their job to be against you on everything. Then you've got, regulatory, just the government in general, and then the market rate of energy efficiency. Then internal buy-in, we have the most votes, and that's usually the hardest, because you got to get your boss on board, you got to get marketing on board, you got all these people that you got to get approval from. So you got to get internal buy-in, customer buy-in, no budget to do it. That's always a big one. Solar buy-in. Nobody seems to value energy efficiency. That's always something hard that's an uphill battle. We have to prove to people that this is a value to the utility and to customers. And then time's another one, getting enough time to get all the buy-in from the right people.
So if you want financial, one just general financial, a couple on cost effectiveness, and that's probably that's a very big topic. Often starting with, well, how do you measure cost effectiveness? Is what we're doing, is measuring it using an energy efficiency standard, going to work for DR, for example, or is it, do we always just use the cost of new entry or avoided cost? Lack of communication on remaining funding and program caps. I know a lot of us had that discussion. Oops, we're out of money, or we just can't, we can't grow because there's just no budget remaining. On the execution side, data integration. I feel like we could probably spend weeks on that one, but Ben will solve that for all of us. SWEPCO's new construction program, owners, trade allies, realtors, developers, engineering. It sounds like a lot of folks to coordinate. Certainly seems a daunting task. Lack of time allocation for needs-based assessments absolutely feeds into the internal buy-in side. And I saw that Peter wrote this one, scope creep. Certainly, we didn't realize we needed to do this, so we'd really like to do this to make it better. Do we have the time? Do we have the budget? Do we have the hours? So some great stuff there.
And of course, there are external factors as well that aren't covered here. Some of the ideas that are up here include technology. So looking at the technologies available to us, taking the themes from the last day or so at the conference about all the additional technologies that we'd like to integrate. Technology is what we try to do, get it in the market. External factors, things like program design, midstream HVAC. This is more expensive, more costly. How do we actually progress this and get market adoption at that level? Contract challenges, similar themes to I think what was put over an internal buy-in. How do you get stakeholders aligned behind program and moving forward so that you can actually get things done? And then finally, we all experience COVID. There are other just external factors at play that have nothing to do with our industry, but have huge impacts on how we try to get our work done and move the ball forward. So lots of food for thought as we continue the conversation here.
So as we head back up on stage, after hearing these, anybody think of one that I won't call on anybody, I promise, but anybody think of something else as we continue the conversation? Like, I wish I'd written that Post-it note. Anything else come to mind? I mean, there were a lot of pretty broad topics over there, all of which stand in the way between an idea and an execution. So before we jump into a specific discussion, I wanted to take a couple minutes amongst us to just share our general thoughts on the topic of how do you take a program from an idea to thermostats on the wall or EV chargers again on the wall, or ultimately delivering megawatts, megawatt hours. I was particularly excited about this topic. It's focused on actually getting it done, and we know there are a lot of challenges in the way there. And the one thought that came up when I started thinking about this are, what are the real goals for the program? And we're going to talk a little bit about contracting, and certainly we put key performance indicators. We talk about, hey, I'm going to deliver 5,000 thermostats, or I'm going to deliver 20 megawatts. Sorry for the E folks in here, because I'm DR focused. We're going to talk about megawatts instead of megawatt hours. But how do you, that ends up in a contract. But what's the real goal? Like, what is is it getting internal buy-in? Is it trying to get a bigger program going? Is it running the program to avoid a peak? A number of the DR programs we work with, for example, are used by a utility to reduce a coincident peak. That often doesn't end up in a statement of work, but understanding a goal like that really helps us design a program, or contract a program, and implement a program. And I always think about we'll talk about this a bit as we go through the next 45 minutes or so, but what's the goal behind the goal? What's that real reason for the program? And I find when we have the real reason for, the real goals behind the program, it just makes it so much more effective because we all know what we're shooting for. And certainly contracts are important, statements of works are important, key performance indicators are important, but being a Boston sports guy, I'm going to pull up a couple of Boston sports analogies, and you may or may not know Hall of Famer Celtics basketball player Bob Cousy said he never thought about the past, he thought about the past to the past to the past. And I feel like when we're doing program design, a lot of times we're thinking about that. We're not thinking about this year, we're thinking about 2028, 2031. Mark H., your thoughts?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things that I try to bring to my thinking and to our team's thinking on looking for opportunities is what do our customers need? And one of the things that is really interesting and wonderful about working at a utility is you really have to think about and embrace what the utility's core mission is, which is to provide safe, reliable power to our customers. And then think about how programs can support that mission. And you know, I know folks maybe in the utility space will hopefully nod in agreement, and folks who help us maybe nod in agreement, but also encourage us to move a little more quickly on things. But each utility is different because ultimately we're just part of a community. We're serving a community. So we really try to have in mind, number one, what are our customers asking for? And they ask for things directly, through feedback to us. They ask for things indirectly through kind of the ecosystem that advocates for customers and ratepayers. So we really try to stay in tune with that. And then also, how do we think and help our customers by being proactive and not just being insular and saying like, well, we know what you want and we understand our community, because we feel like that's doing a disservice. So we try to be open to and stay educated, come to the CLEAResult Energy Forum, stay in touch with peers, look at peer-reviewed articles and white papers on like what are the various technologies out there and how might they play into our space, and can we, through looking through a regulatory lens, through the utility's core business lens of delivering power and working with our T&D planners, looking through an economic lens, is this a responsible thing to pursue at this time? We try to stay in touch with all of the various opportunities out there and be open to discussions on how we might be able to do it, but also be designing for the customer as we go. We feel like if we use that as our true north, we're gonna continue to provide relevant services.
So I'm a plant guy. I love to garden, and so when I think about like what new programs I want to add to our portfolios, I think about it of creating an ecosystem of programs, right? Energy efficiency is multiple things, and one of the main things it is customer service. Like we want to have great positive touch points with the customers. So I try to think about when I'm designing a new program, how can we kind of feed the programs into the next so that we don't just help the customer once, we help them 3 or 4 times. And so I always kind of look to see where do we have those gaps? Is there a customer segment that we're missing? How can we kind of fit in these gaps and create multiple positive touch points? And I gain a lot of inspiration, usually just from my fellow utilities. In Texas, we have a group where the 8 investor-owned utilities, we get together multiple times a year to talk about stuff, and we have a great working relationship between the 8 of us. And so that's something that's really great, because I can see this other utility started this program, it's doing great. I can gain inspiration from what they're doing and then try to apply that to me, and vice versa, where I've been able to do something unique and I've helped given them inspiration to do something as well. So one is just building collaboration with your neighboring utilities. We're not enemies, we're friends, because we're all fighting the same government that we're having to, and the same interveners. So creating a positive community with your utilities is a great place to start. But then also just trying to identify, is there a unique customer segment? And trying to go find other people that have done that and get best practices to kind of get started. Like, for example, one of the programs I launched on my own was an online marketplace. I wasn't the first to ever do it. It's been piloted many times, but I was able to gain inspiration on what other people have done to build my own website.
We appreciate that, both on the customer focus side. At the end of the day, we can design all the programs we want, but if we don't have customers engaging in them, we won't have energy efficiency or demand reduction. And appreciate the utility partnership. It is fun watching, from our perspective. Actually, one of the fun things at Energy Forum is watching all of you connect and get to know each other, and hopefully you're exchanging phone numbers and emails and staying in touch, because you're right, we're all in this together. I mean, we've got, certainly the last couple of days have talked a lot about the challenges we're facing. I mean, it's just math. Like, we don't have enough supply, especially during peak periods, for the next few years, and no one's going to go in a corner and solve this by themselves. I mean, you hear the approach, it's do everything. Let's do this and this and this, and the reality is we do this and this and this, and we got to do it together. So that said, it leads to the first discussion topic, and it's about what do we want to do? What do we want to design? So the default would be, hey, let's do everything right now, which would be great in utter chaos. Certainly, we'd love to pull every thermostat into a program. We'd love to go door to door doing an insulation program. Michael and Matt can get to work on that right now. We'd love to do everything. We don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the time. We don't have the budget, and also not all those technologies are there yet. So when I look at innovation, certainly there are new products out there every day, and I think it's pretty exciting that the clean tech space, that people are flooding into the clean tech space, because we're going to see a lot of innovation, and not every idea is going to be great, but some are. I've spent a lot of my career in startups, and I've seen great ideas that didn't go anywhere. I've also seen great ideas that have gone well, and I've seen not so great ideas that have actually gone pretty far. But really taking a look and saying, okay, what can I do now? And also looking and saying, realizing what your risk tolerance is. So a bit like if I was holding a financial portfolio, and this is going to be different for every utility, but if you're at a certain age, you have a higher mix in more volatile stocks and lower risk in lower percentage in bonds and lower risk investments. And then as you get older, you change that mix. Really, in our industry, it's much of the same. So if there's no innovation, we're not going to do anything new and different. So there's always a need for innovation, but there's also a need to balance what can I do now that I know will work? What can I do now that I'm pretty certain will work based on what I've seen in other utilities? And then do I have the internal appetite to try a couple of new things? And some of them are going to succeed, some of them aren't. But understanding that balance, and it goes back to the looking at the number of Post-its that got put up for internal buy-in. I think about that balance, and thinking about that balance within your utility or your customer seems an important part of figuring out where to start. Marty, your thoughts on the topic?
So when it comes to trying to find that niche, it's really just kind of seeing what else is going on the market. Utilities, we're in a race to be second. So trying to be the new thing is always really scary for utilities because of the amount of scrutiny we have with recovering dollars and using dollars. And so we want to be sure that we're using those dollars wisely. So I always try to gain inspiration from my fellow utilities. What's kind of working in the market? What are the best practices, and how can I fit that in my program? And I think with coming up with new program designs, you want to be incremental and do just a little bit at a time. Add a marketplace this year, add residential DR this year. Let's expand residential DR this year. So instead of trying to create an entire portfolio in 1 year, incrementally kind of do it one time. Kind of like building a castle, you do one stone at a time, and that's how you can build that ecosystem and build those bridges between and create multiple positive touch points. So a lot of it is just incremental improvements over time is what's really going to make the big changes. You don't want to launch a whole new program all at once. Take it in bite-sized pieces, and then you'll be able to make progress year over year.
Yeah, I'd maybe echo a couple of Mark's comments from this question and the prior. So benchmarking is kind of fundamental to how we progress or try new things. And then doing that benchmarking in a thoughtful way that asks the question if what we want to do that's new is actually what our customers need. Because the flip side that goes along with the need is who's going to pay for it, right? And we, with our core energy efficiency programs, thankfully we've got a regulatory construct that allows us to do these programs because they're proven to work. They're independently evaluated, and they can drive a strong benefits case. And when we get more towards the bleeding edge, unless there's a specific mandate out there for us, there really is, I would say, some might call it conservative. I think I would challenge that and just say it's a thoughtful and deliberative process about, are we doing something that we need to do, that we have the authority to do, and it's in our customers' best interests to use ratepayer dollars to do. So I think one of the exciting things about the past few years is all of a sudden there were incremental sources of money that were not directly tied to our customers' rates or to collection through a rider for them. And so, doing IRA and IIJA, we had a Tiger team that was tasked with saying, hey, if you can write grants and apply for these funds, look across the organization and see what you might be able to accomplish if you were to be awarded one of these grants. And we're also, as an aside, we're also not known for being particularly fleet of foot as utilities. And so one of the key criteria in kind of screening out what we were actually going to put resources towards applying for to see if we could get the grants was whether or not we'd be able to get the project done during the prior administration. Because when we're looking at incremental opportunities and looking at sources of funds, if we're able to identify an outside source of funds, and it's something that can be activated quickly so that we don't run into a period of like, well, the funds ran out, now what? I think that's how we maybe look towards the more innovative end of things about how we might try something that's not just sort of a standard that we do all the time, or a peer-reviewed incremental build towards what we know we should be continuing to evolve towards.
Any thoughts from the audience? Any additional areas where you've been looking at new programs, how you've thought of bringing them in? I know a number of you in the room are tasked with identifying new potential programs. Want to see if that stirred any thoughts. Damon.
So thinking about, my mind was wondering, innovation, right? We are where we are right now in this moment. But if you could put your head back 10 years ago, think, oh, wow, could you have imagined that we would be here, right? And so I get curious about where that innovation is going to come from, right? And it comes from a multitude of sources. But I guess the question that I had for both of you as utilities is, do you guys have an internal R&D department? Or how do you look at where the innovations are coming from? And if you don't have an internal R&D department, do you guys, aside from CLEAResult, who we want to be the trusted partner, do you guys have other sources that you look at to kind of spur some of that innovation?
Yeah, Entergy, we do have like an internal R&D department. It's not called that, but it's basically what it is. And so they're working on all kinds of different other ways to help customers. And some of that is not related to energy efficiency, and sometimes it is. And so we're always just kind of trying to watch and see like what's going on with that particular group, and we're looking for new ways to solve it. I think a lot of the innovation is I'm trying to look out multiple years ahead of time and trying to see where the pitfalls are actually in the regulatory space. For example, one that CLEAResult and I have been working on for a while is, commercial lighting, LED lighting is like a great measure in Texas, like where a lot of our savings come from it. At some years, it was 75% of our savings came from LED lighting in commercial, which is awesome. But someday in the far future, hopefully, it will go away, right? And so like when that goes away, if we're not ready, we're going to be in huge trouble. And so we've been trying to figure out and trying to do innovation on how do we make the next program once LED lighting becomes standard? Is that, maybe it was that new type of lighting that doesn't exist yet? we've been really trying to go like, okay, it's going to be HVAC. HVAC's going to be the next kind of big sector of our commercial space that we're looking at. So that's another part of innovation, is you're trying to look forward not just 1 year or 2 years, but into the future on what is the measure going to look like, what is the next efficiency that we can go after. That's really what I do.
Yeah, I would add to that. So at our U.S. utilities, we don't have a center of innovation, but as part of AES, the global company, we do have a team that looks at opportunities for innovation across all of our businesses, including our utilities. So I think about yesterday's AI presentation and sort of the org structure. If it was, I don't know if I'm getting the percentages exactly right, but the 70-20-10, with 10% of folks being in the innovation space, with the hope that that creates unicorns. I would say we tend to interact with those folks in a collaborative way. And look for opportunities to try kind of moonshot things, but ultimately we're bound by our own laws of gravity, which happen to be the energy policy of the state of Indiana and Ohio. So we look at that as a good feedback loop to understand what potential's out there. But I'd say the guiding principle, or the team that we're most closely aligned with on looking for innovation, is actually our resource planning group. And so, every organization's different. I don't know if this is totally, fall off a log simple, or if there's any insight here for the folks in the room. But every 3 years, we're going through an integrated resource plan. And that group, the more closely we're aligned with how we're working with that group's consultants to build out our market potential study, the better. Because they're hiring consultants who have a national purview on kind of every type of energy efficiency that can happen out there, and things that are also emerging tech. And ultimately, they're running all that through an economic screen and boiling all that down to what technologies are out there, what conversations with our customers and surveys of our customers say customers are willing to do or willing to pay for, really sets the frame for how we go about planning and executing. And I'd say that the number one thing that we try to get through that process is a solid understanding of what we think is still left in the market from an existing measure set, and then also work with our regulators and stakeholders to sort of acknowledge that time stands still for no one, including programs. And look for incremental dollars that we can get approval to spend prudently if we're coming across market dynamics that are unexpected as we work through what ultimately is a 12-month process just to keep moving forward.
That's great. Thank you.
We had another question.
Yes.
Sorry, I know Mark probably knows where I'm going to go with this, but I'm with Entergy Arkansas, and as we're talking about this, the DER things is definitely a conversation that I think Mark has been a part of, and I have as well, as far as our group or things like that. But one of the things I don't know if you guys have had any experience with as companies and utilities are trying to change these programs. When you kind of delve into this realm, most utilities have something that they offer already, and it's how do you connect the EE piece of that a lot of times on what you offer through that program, because sometimes we're constrained by the rules that have been set in place for like your conservation and energy efficiency rules, and I think a lot of those things were set in the beginning, and I'm just I think there may be some go back there, and I know a lot of times we don't really change those things, but in this market and how these things are changing, has anybody dealt with anything like that where these rules and you're trying to change to what the future is going towards, but the current rules may not support that, and then how do you integrate that into when you're using these things in whatever market you're in, whether that's MISO or SPP, and kind of integrating that with what your utility does outside of EE, but making sure that works with it as well. So,
I would say, when it comes to like working within the rules and they're not working, like something that we've done as utilities is we've gone after the law that governs. The way it works in Texas is there's a law and then there's a rule, right? And those two things kind of govern everything we do in Texas. And we've actually looked into ways of trying to change the law and taking it to legislation and trying to change it to try to make things better. So sometimes you gotta go political and try to make changes at the state level to kind of make those changes so that you can run better programs. You know, that's the hard thing of being a utility is that the regulatory aspect and the rules that you're under govern exactly like what you're trying to do. And sometimes that is going to be a limiting factor or a pitfall on what you can or can't do. Like we would love to do a ton more energy efficiency, but there's rules and stuff in place that kind of limit how much we do. So a lot of times you might have to go after the law or the regulation that's governed by you and try to make changes. That's a big ask, and that's where you need to partner with your fellow utilities because you got to do it together because it affects all of you.
I'd say I completely agree, and we've got a Indiana Energy Association that's comprised of all of our peers in the state, so that we try to be on the same page for effectively promoting ideas or lobbying for things that are going to be beneficial at the State House. But that process is, outside of our control. And I think the thing that has worked really well, I think, for our group is maybe looking both at existing program designs and then looking also at our tariffs. And so there's sort of like within that construct, the tariffs are maybe the macro environment and the existing programs are the micro environment. So I'll maybe start with the micro environment. So I'm actually proud to have one of my team members and colleagues, two of them actually in the room here today, but Adam Hammond over here has been running our residential programs for several years, and we looked for ways that we could further savings for our income qualified weatherization program. Doing peer comparison, looking to sources like MIA or other kind of public domain places where you can go for what saves energy and how can you get that done. And we didn't really see anything that we weren't already doing. But to Adam and Cole, actually, from CLEAResult, their credit, just sort of looking at the market, talking to contractors and trade allies, found an opportunity to really capture a new technology that wasn't documented in an ATRM, that wasn't being promoted by kind of an industry advisor, and ended up doing in-home air duct sealing with a blow-through technology. I'm kind of butchering it. If you want questions on this, they're here in the room. But really kind of finding the diamond in the rough that no one had really been willing to invest in or say this works, largely because at the time it's a proprietary technology, and that's sort of a challenging space to get behind a proprietary technology. But they were able to develop a case, get approval from our governing body, and go out and do it. And I think that measure adds 6 to 10% savings on average per individual home. And so that's kind of looking for having a continuous innovation mindset and just looking for things that you think might not be there. There are things out there. They're happening all the time. And then on maybe the macro environment, I think I said I've been at AES for 7 years. And one of the first things that struck me as I sort of came up the learning curve, anytime I would talk to someone in our regulatory team about trying something new, they would just say, "Have you read the tariff?" Right? And I'm thinking like, well, no. Maybe, and I guess I don't understand what I signed up here for, but I'll go read the tariff. And we've got our standard rates, and trying to understand those is a whole different department. Educating customers on how their bill works and what they get charged for, and what is reactive power, and you name it. But then looking at the 20 some odd tariff sheets, you start reading through them and saying like, these don't make any sense, right? If I'm in the industry and I'm reading this on a plain read, I understand the words on the page, but I don't understand what to do next if I want to do this, right? And so I think over time, building a relationship, I talked about working with our load forecasting team, but also building a relationship with our regulatory team and being patient and advocating for what we're hearing from customers and what they want, and then being thoughtful about how if we look at some tariffs in partnership with you, our regulatory team, we could modify them and seek commission approval for these modifications in ways that would actually activate the tariff, and then have the business case backing up why that's good for the company and why it's good for the customer. That's, I think, maybe if we're crawl, walk, run. If crawl is looking for micro opportunities, if walk is looking at our tariff sheets, and if run is engaging in policy change, I think that's kind of the universe in which we're looking for change. And each one, depending on where you're at in your state's jurisdiction, and whatever the policy environment is, whatever the political environment is, scanning that landscape and looking for opportunities is really kind of how we try to go about doing new things.
A question for both of you. Roughly what percentage of your time do you think as portfolio owners, what percentage of your time do you spend on really regulatory focused items rather than implementation or team management or the like?
Too much. Too much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like maybe 30%. It varies from month to month, season to season, issue to issue, but it's taking up more time than I would like it to.
Yeah, I would say it's cyclical, and so sometimes it's absolutely too much. Other times, I'm wondering if it's enough. But I try to have 5% of my time at a minimum engage with regulatory, just because the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and our regulatory teams are charged with every aspect of our business that has a regulatory touch on it. And I think, as we identified on the Post-it board, demonstrating the value of energy efficiency feels like you have to. It's an evergreen objective. You always have to be educating up within the organization, even if it's the same stakeholders, about why it's important, why it's relevant. And so always having a little bit of time allocated to the discussion, and sometimes it's like 100 when we're trying to get a case built.
Move on to the next topic, and actually that was a perfect segue because we probably hit a bit of that there. But getting to yes, and as the three of us were talking about this session and this topic in particular, a couple of things came to mind. One is there may not be a lot of people who need to say yes, but invariably there are a lot more people who can say no. The people like to be involved and aware. There are, continuing the sports analogy, you've got to be able to look around corners. Where you may be thinking, hey, I'm going to, again, the air sealing program you mentioned sounds great. Like, hey, you think you've got a path, but what other folks are going to be interested in that? Are your regulatory side, safety, field teams, union, who's going to be interested in this topic, who is going to be fine with it as long as they know, but who doesn't want to be caught surprised. Certainly we all know, both as both as leaders of teams and as people who report up, the worst thing you can do to somebody is surprise them. So thinking about this piece, who are the people you need to get to know? And I think that's an area we're always learning, and it always seems like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this done. I'm just going to go ahead and push this forward. And sometimes that works, and then sometimes you stub your toe because you weren't able to reach out to that extra person or that extra group. Appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd say every incremental idea that we consider, you almost have to be able to just quickly put together a racy chart and say who are the stakeholders that need to say yes to this, or else we'll start investing time and energy in it, and we'll run into the stakeholder that says you should have brought me in from day one and you didn't, so it's a no, right? That's kind of how it ends up going. So from our core business, from our day-to-day business, our primary stakeholders are our governing body, which is comprised of our state utility consumer council and a consumer advocate group. And having them feel like they're read into ideas and decisions is critical for us to be able to progress things. Internally, if we're doing our core business, it's really keeping our regulatory team apprised of our activities. We tend to run our own cases with a little bit of support from the attorneys who kind of make the wheels click and turn. But anything that gets outside of core program delivery, it's really situationally dependent. So we recently launched a set of electric vehicle programs, and so we had a lot of coordination with our T&D planning department on that, and ongoing engagement. Without that, ultimately the premise behind the pilot is you guys are doing more interconnects on the grid and looking to better understand load shapes so that your planning team can be informed of load pockets and how to plan for load growth. Without having that team at the ground floor, we're sort of just talking to ourselves. Another example is a green energy program. Ultimately, we're wanting to be responsive to large customer sustainability goals, and we really have to get involved with the commercial side of the business, who is not only in charge of power generation and delivery, but also tends to own the environmental attributes associated with that business. So it's really just situational, what you're trying to accomplish, and figuring out who your stakeholders are.
Yeah, I found this part of who you need to talk to is one of the hardest parts about launching any kind of new program. And so let me tell you a story. I was trying to launch a new online marketplace. We had tried to start it. COVID happened. That delayed it a year. And we started trying to work through, okay, how do we get this going? We got the contract in place. We got approval from the government to do it. And so you're trying to move along, and internally you're like, oh, now I need to talk to IT. Now I got to talk to risk analysis. You got all these. I felt like all these new hoops kept coming up as I was going along, because there's no playbook on this is how you launch a new program. And so you just kind of stumble forward until you hit the next approval. You figure that out, and then you jump through that hoop, and then, oh, look, there's another hurdle. And I was about to launch an online marketplace. I think it was November 2021. We were trying to launch it, and it got stopped the day before because I didn't know I needed to talk to my regulatory lawyer to approve it, and she shut it down the day before launch. And I was like, oh, man. I was like, okay. And so I finally figured that out, get that done. And then, oh, look, IT comes along. They need to figure it out. And then there's there's this other thing you got to do. You got to go to this website, fill out this form, fill out this thing. And all these internal approvals can add up. And it's really, you just kind of have to fumble forward and try to figure out what's the next approval. So if you're trying to launch anything new, especially internally, give yourself a year and a half to figure it out, because you're going to hit internal barriers from supply chain or risk analysis or IT or legal or regulatory, because those things are going to be your biggest trip up, not necessarily your intervener in your rate case, but those are going to be, well, sometimes your biggest hurdles are internal. So finally, we did get the marketplace launch it, and now that I've done it enough times, I kind of know where the hoops are, and so that we in CLEAResult, we can kind of plan through these things. Some wisdom nuggets I would give you: the two things that are going to take you the biggest time is going to be anything regarding a lawyer. They're going to be the thing that's going to delay that project, or those stinking terms and conditions. So if you're doing anything, definitely give your lawyers at least a year and a half to figure it out, so that you can move on and actually get to launch your program.
I'll use the term stinking terms and conditions in our Gantt charts going forward. Any other thoughts here? Any questions? All right. Wyatt, go ahead.
I think for me, when you're trying to launch any kind of new program, you really kind of think about it as like a generic organization. You know, there's marketing, all these different things. So pretty much everybody in a general big organization like we are, you got to touch every single one. And so it's really just about writing out like every single department that's going to need to be contacted. Like a big thing for me is I forgot to tell marketing what I was doing. And they're like, oh, hey, we're launching this thing next week. Can you make me a social post? They're like, no. Like they have their own stakeholders and stuff. Everybody's trying to get their attention to get their stuff out, right? So like I'm now competing against storm prep posts and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it is just I had to fumble through it and figure it out. I would say a tool or a resource is, you know, what are the generic big departments you would see in a Fortune 500 company? And that's probably a good rubric to start. Like, okay, I got to talk to marketing. I got to talk to lawyers. I got to talk to regulatory. I got to talk to this person, right? That's where I would start, is trying to outline what are all the major departments. And then, you know, as a utility, you need to figure out what is the approval process. For example, we have something called GUARD, which is our risk analysis. And you need to give them time to do their process, because if they don't feel comfortable with it, that's gonna be a game killer and kill it. And, you know, some of it is just ignorance, right? I didn't know I needed to talk to IT. They had their own thing called START. I'm like, what the heck is START? Nobody told me I had to go through this. So you almost have to, as a utility, you need to figure out where are those approval checkpoints, because you might not even know that they exist.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, I would say we have a dynamic internal environment, and so as you're thinking about it, what I have done and what I've encouraged team members who are working on new things to do is think of it almost like a merry-go-round that you want to get spinning, but it's a lot easier to go around and tell people that you're having a merry-go-round party and would they like to participate before you start spinning it, because invariably someone along the way will say, like, you never talked to me about this. And I think by having an intro where you're contemplating what are the organizational checkpoints, if you've done that diligence and you've touched on, you know, really the key decision makers up front, and you've got upfront buy-in, then it's a lot easier to be able to fend off no's once the merry-go-round's spinning. Because you've invited people, whether they show up or not is kind of, you know, their choice, as long as you've done the advertisement and you've got some executive sponsorship behind it.
Yeah, appreciate that. Personally, I always have a bias towards action. Like, let's just go do this, and realizing, you know, I like that merry-go-round analogy. Like, it's a lot easier. It's a lot harder to stop a merry-go-round once it's going, but it's easy to stand there and you know, put your foot in it so you can't get it spinning. Something I have to remind myself of as well is taking the time to make sure everybody's engaged. You know, sometimes just letting people just want to know, and there are always going to be people who have the extra questions, but you're so much better off getting those questions up front. And that goes against, when you're talking about innovation happens fast. Innovation is evolving. Innovation is due. It's counter to, hey, let's stop and be thoughtful and deliberate. But the reality of the environments we work in are thoughtful, deliberate environments. So speaking of those stinking terms and conditions, last thing I want to end on, there we go, is contracting, our favorite topic. Nothing like last morning of a conference, we're going to pull up a 30-page T's and C's and go through it. Or let's not do that. But talking about the big picture contracting, and the one thing I thought about is, as we were thinking of this topic, is we start the contracting process, and we put in the goals for the program, key performance indicators, what's the ultimate goal of that program, megawatts, megawatt hours, number of devices, and the like. And then we go through the editing process, and we start negotiating. The lawyers get involved, and indemnification happens. All these sections start getting edited, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, where's the goal of the program here in the first place? It really makes you think about making sure, reminding ourselves that in this process, when we talk about what a contract looks like, it's important to remember the goal of it. What is the ultimate goal of the program? The goal of a program is not to have an indemnification section. Certainly, that protection is needed and necessary, but the goal of the program is to deliver, whether it's capacity or kilowatt hours. And also thinking about making sure that those goals in the contract reflect both the immediate goals and the goal right in front of you, but also making sure that as best possible they reflect that long-term goal. Again, if the goal of a particular program is, say, peak load mitigation for the utility, the goal in the contract may be a certain number, but does that goal really reflect what you're trying to get out of the program? Anything to add to that?
Contracting's hard, like that's where a lot of new program designs can come. I think a lot of it is I kind of have an idea of where the program is, where I want it to go, and I give myself kind of soft goals. Like I would be happy if we got to this level. So understanding what's the level to where you would be happy with the program, and if you go above and beyond it, great. But like kind of set like a baseline for yourself of this is where I would be happy if we got to that level. And then kind of figuring out the details is something we can use to kind of negotiate. But just making sure that you kind of have it on paper and give yourself flexibility if anything goes wrong or anything changes. So definitely just kind of setting a baseline to where I would be happy if I got this result.
Contracting is hard, mainly because there are lawyers involved, and you need a year and a half to get anything done, as Mark demonstrated earlier. I think one of the things that one of the reasons we love working with CLEAResult is because we've been working with them for a long time, and we've got a lot of trust. And there's an understanding of sort of, for daily delivery, like what the economic necessity is if we want to keep our enterprise of energy efficiency moving forward. Everyone understands where we need to align. And I think some of the challenges with doing innovation or with pushing beyond kind of status quo really get into just, again, a contemplation of why are we doing this and how do customers benefit. And as long as we've got a balance there between, programmatic goals, partner economic incentives, it's a business, right? Everyone has to be able to make money, and customer benefits. As long as those three things balance out on net, I think that's where we're able to, move away from status quo script and find ways to take risks incrementally, where no one's risks are going to be fully mitigated, but everyone's going to have maybe a different balance than standard-based programs.
And I do feel like we've got a support group up here, so I'm going to finish this. Hi, my name is Mark. Contracting is hard. The last piece that comes to mind before we open up the topic is we're always balancing the level of detail. And in the interest of expediency, the statement of work should say one line: we're going to do the program and get it done. And then there's the statement of work that says you will wear a light blue striped shirt on Tuesdays. And and the reality is the balance is in the middle. And a lot of it does go into the relationship too, where like we want to have the flexibility in a document to do things and adapt as things change, but then that interest in rigor as well, which again is contradictory to an innovation environment, where in an innovation environment we might need to change next week. And there's no real answer there, but being thoughtful about, I want this to be a flexible document, or I need this to be a rigid document, is important going in the front end. And as I said, making sure that doesn't get lost as you're going through the details. Certain agreement we're working on over the holidays, Mark, comes to mind, and when it's December 29th at 6 p.m. and you're on the phone with two lawyers, true story for the two of us, it's very easy to, you get the contractual details right, but you miss going back to the first slide, you miss the forest for the trees.
And I would say don't be afraid of doing a contract change. You know, that's something we experienced when kind of launching our residential load management. Is our first goal was like we just wanted 750 devices, and we would just be happy with any KW we got. But we learned pretty quickly, like, oh, like that's not going to be really cost effective. We got to get to 5,000 devices, and we got to have the major players like Ecobee and Nest. And after we did that contract change, and definitely put more money into it, now we're getting better results. So don't be afraid of starting small and adding contract changes as you go. I know they stink, but at least that gives you don't be afraid to pivot. And sometimes it's going to require a contract change because things change, you learn, and that's the whole part of innovation is you're going to have to adjust.
Any questions from the audience? Any thoughts? All right. We are at time. I really want to thank Mark and Mark. We've kind of echoed conversations we have on the phone pretty regularly, and when this topic came up, taking it this direction immediately came to mind, and the two of you came to mind, and I really, really appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Mark and Mark.
Thank all of you for being with us this morning. Great to be here.
Yeah, and I guess seeing our respective teams here, I'll end on a thank you to everybody we work with because, you're all stakeholders, but we're all in this together, and none of this happens. Like I said, none of this happens by one person. We all do it as a team. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.